Hello. I'm Sarah Hackett, and I'm one of many members of our personalized learning research team here at UW-Madison. Today we wanted to talk to you about a slice of our personalized learning work around conferring. And we were able to work with some really incredible schools around the state to really dive into what some of their personalized learning practices and assessments look like. And today we're going to talk about that a little bit and then also dig into actually the kind of the design of the work and really understanding what that would mean for you and what different models are around conferring. And Julie will help us understand kind of all that could include in a couple of minutes. So before we get into the work itself, it'll be really helpful, even though we have a pretty short session today, I want to help you understand who all is in the room so that we can work together and learn from each other, because that's always a big part of personalized learning. So we want to start with introductions, and then we'll get into, like I said, talking about our research, talking about examples of the work, and then allowing you to really customize and think about how that work could link with the stuff that you do in your daily life. And then the user testing is sort of reflecting on the design work. So I know that sounds like a lot, and we only have 50 minutes together, but we've gone through this exercise a number of times, and I think that we'll do an abbreviated version and kind of get through it all with you, and hopefully you'll take something really tangible away. So your name and role, and then the context that you interact with learners, because we do have such a cool conference here today where people are coming from a whole kind of myriad of different roles. And so I will start actually, because I didn't really introduce myself. So my name is Sarah Hackett, and I am a member of this research team, but in addition, I also have a job. I'm the director of the Wisconsin Resource Center for Charter Schools, and so I'm helping with professional development and design work all over the state, primarily in charter schools, but actually contradictory to its name, not exclusively in charter schools. So that's me. I'm going to have my other research team buddies here introduce themselves, and then we'll go around and do we need to pass the mic the whole time or just let it be? Okay, all right, go ahead then, Jessie.
Hi, I'm Jessie Nixon, and I was also part of the personalized learning research team.
Hello, I'm Tanu. I'm also part of the personalized learning research team. I'm a graduate student in education leadership, and I study the interaction of technology with kids. And I'm from India, so I study that basically in India also.
Arlene Strikwerda, part of the team. I am focusing on instructional practices for students.
Hi, I'm Julie Kallio. This is Charlie. And I think he may make his presence known at some point during this. So I worked on the project, and I'm studying leadership in personalized learning schools.
Hi, I'm Jerry Dreyer. I'm part of this team, and I'm a graduate student here in educational leadership, and I'm studying equity and personalized learning.
And so do I, UW Milwaukee.
Molly Mosley, I'm a high school science teacher from Sweden.
I'm Leanne, I'm a graduate student here in CNI.
I'm Andrew. I'm also a graduate student in CNI. I also work for Doing Academic Technology. Yeah.
I'm Leanne Bourne. And I am the teacher leader for advanced learning in Madison School District, which is Madison's sort of branding of gifted and talented.
Maria Martin, advanced learning specialist and teacher leader in MUSD with Leanne.
I'm Kai. I just graduated here from University of Wisconsin-Madison in CNI. And I'm kind of in the middle of a bunch of intern gigs with the Bubbler, Madison Public Library, and teaching artists stuff in public schools.
My name is Cindy Bryan. I teach at a middle school in Madison, and I teach computers.
My name is Larry. I teach second and third grade in Verona, the school called Century.
My name is Ben Holbert. I am a teacher at Sandberg Elementary. I was lucky enough to be a part of some of this amazing research.
My name is Jessie Nixon. I work here on campus at the Wisconsin Center for Education Research, and I was also part of the research team.
Good morning, I'm Steve Kimball, also with WCER and the Wisconsin Evaluation Collaborative, and partnered with colleagues here as well.
Quincy Miller, John, a high school technology and engineering teacher at Middleton.
I'm Max Nine. I'm from Berlin, and I'm working in political education using various methods. I'm working for the Landesverband in Berlin.
I'm Charles Pay. I'm with UW Health and Kirkpatrick School.
I appreciate all of that, thank you. So I'm going to hand it over to Julie and Charlie, and they can introduce the project.
So it is really helpful to hear all the different contexts that you guys are coming from, because I think you'll find that the protocols that we have and the protocols you're going to develop really speak to this sort of work. So what we did is we had this idea of a network improvement community. So that's basically we wanted to bring people together to do some design work so that they could learn across contexts. So exactly kind of what we have here, people coming from different contexts, you're going to get new ideas, you're going to get new ways of thinking about your own practice. So we brought together, first we wanted to figure out what we should work on, and so we kind of canvassed the state. We went around, we did visits, we called and talked to people, we went to conferences, and then we identified this idea of conferring as being something that people were both excited about, but also didn't really know what they were, I don't want to say didn't know what they were doing, but they hadn't formalized the practice. They said, well, we do it all the time. Well, we do it for projects. Well, we do it with kids who are struggling. Well, we do it with kids who we're pushing them to go further. So we had this idea that everybody was doing it, but we didn't really know what they were doing. And then we recruited 5 schools, and then you have us in the middle, to come together for 90 days and do this design work. And what we decided to work on were these conferring protocols. This is a little bit more about all the different places that we got this idea from. And this is a really big shift in terms of how research is traditionally approached, rather than us coming up with, the gap in the literature, rather than us coming up with the idea, we wanted to talk and say, what is going to be valuable and relevant in your practice. And it is this idea of conferring. And I will say, since we have started working on it, now we kind of find it everywhere at national conferences and people talking about this idea. And in a lot of ways, conferring, so the way we began to define it was these one-on-one conversations with students that happen at a regular interval. They're not the sort of like little check-in that you might do in the middle of a project, but they're regular conversations, and that they talk about process, so how is the learning happening, products, so you may have a student bringing to you an example of their work and then talking through that. And so they're more formal. But in a lot of ways, that's like the root of good learning, right, is these conversations. So what we want to do is see how could we design something that would help communicate this process across contexts. So this is our definition that we came up with. We had one of the researchers on our team doing her dissertation ask teachers, gave them a list of all the different things they do in personalized learning and said, what has the highest utility for you? And every single teacher that she interviewed reported conferring as being the most important thing that they did. So that gave us a good idea that conferring was going to be important. And then we started to categorize it, say like, well, how is it happening across these different places? Sometimes the purpose was a little bit different, sometimes how long it happens. Some teachers described having half-an-hour conversations, some described 5 minutes. Who initiates it? Some teachers were saying, well, my kids come to me, and then we have a conversation. Some people had like a spreadsheet checklist of I meet with each kid in this order. I guess, so duration, but then also how often. Some are saying it happens once a month, sometimes it's once a week. So a lot of variability in it. So what we actually did when we brought 21 teachers and 10 researchers together for this 90 days, we asked them first. They watched videos of each other conferring. And what that did was allow us to see the practice as it happens now. So one of the pieces that I think we often jump to what I want to do, and that's too far of a leap from what I actually do right now. And so we started with what the practices actually are now, because that's something that's happening. And then the improvement step is one step away from that. So then we had participants write down what they actually do, and then one step more, what would you like to do? And then they developed these protocols. So protocols are sort of in between. They're not a script, but they're not a guide. So they're a little more formal than a guide, but they're not, say this thing, ask for this response, like a script. And with that, I will turn it over to Arlene, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the protocols themselves.
So we have one example here of a protocol. And this particular protocol has a goal. And the goal is this aspect, you can read it perhaps, but it's fomenting feedback for teachers and students. It's an opportunity for conferring to start interest-based projects. So that's what they wanted to do. There's a time frame that they allowed, and the focus was learning progress. I want you to think about the focus, because up front they needed to understand what it is they wanted students to learn from this protocol. So that's a learning progress. And then they went into, if this is our goal and if this is what we want students to take away from this, a progress of how to go through an interest-based project, how to start that, then what is the description that we want? So thinking from their purpose and their focus, they went into a description. Having got that clear, they went into the language, the conversation they would have with students. A lot of student prompts, a lot of ideas, a focus on what are you going to do? Why are you going to do it? Who do you need help from? What kind of quality do you want? The kinds of questions you might have if you were interested in starting a project. And then the third part was to have some sort of documentation, to think ahead, how are you going to document this so that you have evidence of what students did. This is one of 5 protocols with this particular purpose, and if you look at the top, you can access the document where all 5 protocols are. This is quite useful. Ariel?
Yeah.
So I did a quick summary of the other 4 so you have an idea of what's there, but think about there's the goal, a time frame that you think it will take, and then the focus. What do you want from students? Is this the learning process? Is this the product that you're going for? Or do you want to talk about progress? Because there's going to be different goals that you want when you confer with students. So in each case, the description then and the conversation that you would have, and then how are you going to document that? So for the first one, I don't expect that you're going to see the language or the print, it's pretty small. But the first one in that document you can get is conferring to understand individual student or learner identity. That was their goal, and they were looking at a learner process. And then they went ahead and thought through what the description, the conversation, and documentation would be. The second one is student ownership. This was an interesting one where they wanted students to actually know when they needed help and to provide an opportunity for students to ask for that help, to go to the teacher and say, I need help, could I have a conferring session with you? So this particular school, they were thinking of the process, but also a product. I need help, I'm in a situation. So again, they developed ownership, and they did this on a 3-level status, so that even kindergartners could be asking for help. And then they went up through their grade levels, so that there was an early stage and a middle stage and a more advanced stage as students learned more about when they needed help. The third one is the one we already did, this interest-based project. The fourth one is an interesting one where they wanted peers to talk with each other about the projects, so that you could present your information to another peer, and they could then listen to what you're saying and give you feedback and ask questions. So there's prompting for that. And that was a learning progress, so that as students were going through their project, they had an opportunity for feedback. And the last protocol was one about a map of a whole year. It's like this school was doing a lot of conferring, but it was here and there, and they were saying, let's break this down and show you what it would look like over a whole school year in 6-week blocks. And then also according to student progress. So an earlier student might have this kind of protocol, but a student who's more advanced can have this one, and the very advanced students can have that one. So there's a map there. So I'm just going to refer you to the top for later reference in terms of these are protocols people have done. But our goal today is to let you actually do a protocol. So think about what is your goal and what is your focus? What do you want from students? You want them to think about themselves as a processor? Are they going for a product, or what about the progress in terms of what
All right, so that's a lot to kind of put together. And keep in mind, when we did this, it was a 90-day cycle. We were working with educators and meeting. They gave up their time on Saturdays to come together and work on all this. What we're going to do today, and maybe it's probably easiest to think about a time that you regularly have conversations with youth or with your peers, and maybe how you might want to focus in on something you already do. And think about what the goal really is there, so you can start to think about what kind of questions you might ask. What we're going to do in a really short amount of time is create something, give it to somebody else for feedback, which is also a really scary feeling. But we found really that even early on, getting somebody else to look at that and look at what you're doing really gives us the necessary feedback to then revise that, right? We know this, but I don't think we do it enough. So we're going to quickly make a protocol, share it with somebody, and then kind of and go from there. So we have a digital copy of the protocol, and we also have a few hard copies, which I'll hand out here in just a minute. Would anybody prefer the hard copy of this?
Could we talk for a minute about who everyone's learners are? Because I think we kind of said it at the beginning, but like maybe some, like, I'm just wondering about some of the people here, like based on how they introduce themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I'm thinking about in any given workspace or as a graduate student, or there are people, right, that we have regular conversations with for a purpose. Right? We talk to maybe our coworkers, or we talk to our boss, or we talk to our peers. As a graduate student, right, I actually met with a writing group once a week. And we kind of, early in the beginning, thanks to Julie, set out these goals, right? There's a purpose for us meeting, and there's a purpose for what we want to accomplish. So even in that, it was conversation with a purpose, but it wasn't even that long. These protocols, they don't have to be for super long. It can be for like, maybe you need to be regularly checking in with somebody once a week or once a month, and use this as a guide for how you might have that conversation. If you are not working with youth or not in that teaching capacity, I think there are lots of ways it could be used. Does that help at all? Think of somebody, so it could even be like a staff meeting or a faculty meeting, and how that might go. So something that you already do where you are conversing with people. The steps of the protocol, as Arlene already described, and when we did this with educators, it's not something easy to just jump into. So maybe starting with, right, what do you want to accomplish in that faculty meeting or in that meeting with your fellow employee or with your student or with your boss, whatever it might be. And then that goal is going to drive in this later part with the conversational prompts, like what kind of things might you use to start those conversations? And it's not like that day you're going to pull out your protocol and say, hold on, let me go to number 2 and ask this question. Sometimes it was, but this is just what do you already do? Start with that. Does that help? Yes, no, maybe so. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna take about 15 minutes to do this, and all of us are gonna come around and kind of talk with you. No pressure whatsoever. This is happy, welcoming space. Just think about someone you regularly have a conversation with. Okay.
And how long?
About 15 minutes. Okay. Oh, yes, thank you. If you will make a copy of the Google Doc and not write right in that one, then we won't be writing on top of each other if you're using the digital. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to like.
Oh, yeah.
I see your face, I was like.
No, you are.
Cool.
It's a lot.
That's great.
It's a lot.
Right. Yeah, it's.
Oh, we're doing great. Yeah. That's okay. No worries. Cool. Actually, we met for an entire week on this building.
So you work together, but you're in the school.
I used to play when I worked here was last year.
Okay, so like.
Yes.
Multiple.
We've actually done a lot of building on it.
Yeah.
It's, one building that got done, we're in the middle of doing it now.
Okay.
Sheriff is,
It's
doing
Well, knowledge bases. Yeah. I always have to email them every week.
So, we're just still filling in.
But now
But
this year
like,
for the first
in
time.
terms of the flow chart, we got to the idea, because this is the first, this is when you start the program, so you have an idea. What do you want to do?
Did you want to
Who's your audience?
There's a lot.
But then you really sort of see, a lot of our students are fundamentally work that bridge, so we just worked on this summer. And that's work that every student needs to do. So we were working on like, for introspection, like kids getting to know themselves, who they are. And so we just were creating a toolkit with everything from student interest surveys, character surveys, knowing themselves on character traits.
Oh, like the ones that we.
Start tapping into, like having students, do a lot of cognitive work to understand what are the things I think I like, so that's where we're at now. Yeah. We're still working, we're still trying to rest up. Yeah. Right, and this is, and now we're doing that pre-work, and then hopefully we'll start doing that during project stuff, so, we really start looking into a lot of this stuff, like the project planning conference. You know, when we sit down with kids, we're finding they're not ready. So, some of those raw interviews are just, you know, so we, just to avoid, we talked about this a lot, that dreaded rabbit hole. We probably was something that my life is probably that out 4 weeks into it, so we're hoping a lot of these course will help us, you know, move 30 seconds. Yeah, and then really pushing out instead of like, protocol. You know, we want to accomplish all these different questions, especially modeling with students. Actually sitting down and modeling the protocol. Just being more deliberate. Yeah, beginning of the year. Well, yeah, but that's one of the reasons we're these kids, third, it's not gonna be.
Oh, yeah, but then also on the project, and the project go on, so project-based learning, so
I'm listing all projects here, which not Alex, so.
yeah, so this gives them like the big, like, idea for like do a video that's like this, and then they get to have more voices in. I use my word for it, I use resourcing it as part of all the kids. And how long does it take? Where it's like, we're just coming out of that, so it's sort of,
And almost kind of like, I think one of the nice things is that kids know what to expect. So they would start to come on with like evidence for it, or like they would know that when they make a mistake, you know? So then teachers don't feel blindsided. You're like, hey, by the way, I noticed you're not doing it. It's so fun, right? It's just working that to shift them.
Yeah, it's just like, this is one thing.
That's what it is, so we try to do, and then it's probably a lot of like, we have, so, and that's the academic top. And the other projects, and then probably when you actually meet with two teachers, and so you have, and then they have the,
Oh, wow, okay.
And if they left kind of like,
when they talk about awareness about sharing it, what
okay,
Really should hit on everything. Each time. Because you would also do like first domain, so like the macro that are focused on. The next time we meet, we're gonna talk about next time, you know, we're gonna hear you run through.
So,
tell me about your body, your
One of the
So
sort of
do my
figuring out
high school
right now the students to guide them. I mean, I do think what I really like
So
about it is
trying to
they
start down
Right, but to formalize them in real terms.
focus on the process of the product.
Yeah, and they don't see us, they come in their class, and then there's a 15 or 14 and others. And so then, the fifth graders will sort of be.
Well, and the other thing.
Just digging through more of the biggest
But that might be a nice model for how, just like guiding people in that class.
And so figuring out
But the process.
family name, address, is local.
Oh, they're usually named to finish.
From there, make it full size. To make sure
But I mean, a lot of that's.
Oh, yeah.
before they just start cutting and we kind of check in.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have an idea for this?
Yeah, they do, that's what I'm saying, like, you try to.
What is with the
And then
template?
teach somebody else.
Yeah, but I was gonna bring a stroller today and I wonder if they could do
Changes to give it the film.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Right, and that's really, like, kind of thinking of our conversations prompts, is so I guess to the thinking process. Why did you think that? What are your next steps?
Right, and after like that, what do you think?
Right, yeah. Yeah, I guess this, I mean, flow chart, so what do you just have any changes, yes, that's
But what about other
Same thing.
And we, and we're even vocalizing,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, how, like, I mean, this question in particular, did you make changes to your plan? Well, no.
or I wonder, just like the wording of it, like, what gender and you can
Right.
I mean, they can still say. Yeah, they, that's, that really, like, or like, and actually, being able to visualize that. I mean, being able to vocalize what they're from ourselves.
Well, and one of the benefits, well, benefits for those shops is the actual learning is relatively strict, right? I don't expect you to understand how to
But you know it's, yeah, you know it's
Right.
Because, yeah, I think without this attempted process, it's coming in part of something on the chart and
yeah. This is essentially, so what was kind of cool when we did this was, what was kind of scary. We recorded like a habit of teachers. And then that was, and then like watching.
No, just only from the assessment.
They all get, it's, well,
Yes,
that's perfect.
Yeah.
We don't use that link is actually.
And they were, you know,
I know,
you're
that's 6 yeah.
so that if another educator met with
I already have a bunch of
but yeah, I think
so even just having this next steps, I don't know. I just thought that was Yes, we're at now, these are the two that we've worked on a lot of stuff. Ideation. So it's like really fun, like, getting to know yourself, being the foundation to getting to take a project that's
we're gonna take like one more minute, and so if you wanna roll up what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, which projects?
Roll up.
Earlier, breaking it down, just all the way down to like getting to know yourself. I think we should about projects now. We're just saying, really getting to know you, very like an individual being. what you like
mostly
and what your passion and purpose are, how that part actually transpire into a project,
built
in that connection, and then taking that and actually ideating,
maximizing how those conversations.
ideation of, well, maybe I could do this. Once they start to refine that, then we're ready for project planning. We kind of see how these will feel like peer. Yeah, interaction. We like to have them conferring with each other a ton more before they even pick our what's the project idea.
A lot of times,
That's where we're at now. Yeah. So it's amazing. But it's
I was like, I never
really
like
related.
yeah.
Big ideas.
Awesome, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah.
We're right in hearing you guys say like the 90 days. One, take what you're doing existing ideas and then one.
Okay, awesome.
The rest.
That would be helpful.
I think we're gonna exchange.
So we'd like to have that but I also have time to figure out.
Yeah.
To get feedback from there.
Whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much for that. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Thank you very much for your time.
So, yeah.
And I've got it.
Okay, so I hope we are like sort of ready with our protocol or hopefully ready with our protocol. And what we'll do right now is that we'll try out what you designed so far with somebody else. Try to find somebody that you don't know so that you can explain your protocol and then walk through. So just turn it on to a partner, preferably somebody you don't know, and walk through your protocol. Sarah?
If they don't have it totally written out, can they just explain it?
That will work. Try to find one person, like at least one of you should have something written out. That it'll be easier to, it'll be more
Kind of good
productive.
feedback.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to get feedback. And focus not just on like as Julie put on the slide, that both positive comments and formative feedback about what can be done in the protocol. So, you've done 10
Sounds
minutes.
good. And how much time do we have?
10 minutes.
10
Well,
minutes.
probably about 5 minutes.
Oh, 5
5
minutes.
minutes.
5 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely, sorry.
Who do you partner? All of them.
Alright, I know.
Sorry, Charles.
Molly and then, sure, that'd be awesome.
What are you working on?
To you.
So we have our biggest buy is the
Oh, wait.
far away.
Sarah, do you have it? I just Oh, yeah, that's what I was saying, yeah, no, they're not, yeah.
In the middle of the session. Like 3 days later.
So I was just over there on Friday, yeah, so Diane, so she's not like dressing, she's right now. Yeah, well, okay, so what I did is, just made up jobs, it's like, he's like, yeah, I'm like a student, learner centered, like, it's like not even like a quick title, it's not a good position, it's not a good profession, like, it's like, people is like once a week, like what I do, kind of, but, and then Christina said she called, she called me, so it's, oh, look at Renaissance, yeah, no, they just, every time
We're really trying to
and like they can't get out from Jim's tried it, that was when they changed their name and website, like she just tweaked the whole process. And I think Ryan has had this big vision.
That's where I'm
and she like so I think they were just like so yeah, I had a training with them for and like when it wasn't going to be Ryan, I was like, who's it going to be? And he's like, Christina. And then Christina's leaving. I'm like, Christina, like who's this meeting? I booked with you. The institute, because it's not Ryan personally, Christina Trader. Yeah, right, who's gonna have grants to their research? No, actually, they have no years.
We're going to Rich and talk to while they're running all these trees.
They have the LDA, well, yeah, and then it was Christina thing, and Ryan left, and then I was like, she had lived at Waffle Shop then, and then came on with Ryan to associate director. So yeah, there's like yeah, right.
He was like, this is where it's all right.
Okay, great, so I would make sure they get to say what they learned from, specifically just getting what they learned from it.
Alright, can you guys finish up your conversation?
Stuff for something.
All right, thank you. I know this was kind of a very quick dash at trying to do some design work and get feedback. Like wait time. Okay. Great. I hope that you all continue your conversations after our session today, but we only have about 5 minutes left, so I wanted to give you a chance to debrief. I want to ask you a kind of specific question. There's a lot of things that my curious self wants to know is what you designed and how it went and how you're going to use it and all that stuff, but really what I want to pinpoint, because of this is kind of design focused, is what did you get out of the feedback interaction that you had right now? We're curious as designers to know how important that piece is to this process, and I think that in reflecting on that for these last couple of minutes, you could take that kind of notion into your work with your learners and understand that that feedback interaction is really where you often get the learning, that's where the learning is occurring, and that's often where the most important kind of aha moments are. So could we just bounce around a little bit and talk about what came out of these conversations? And some of it may have crept back into the conversations that you had while you were doing your design, but also now specifically when you were getting your feedback. Anything come to mind? Yeah.
I think I was given a different strategy by listening to another protocol. Like the protocol I'm hearing for the shop teacher was, what is the conditions of what we're going to be welding? What is our actions? And then what is the final project? And you have to think about, so I work with students during internships. Okay. And different students have different needs. And making sure that I'm celebrating not just the completion of the internship, but I'm also focusing on the actions and the mistakes.
Oh, sure, the
having
process.
a conversation with all those kids. And I'm also making sure that I'm reaching out for the ones that are just doing nothing because they know I'm overwhelmed. So making sure that I'm giving them the same action, because when you have 70, and there's only 2 people, 70 internships, it's really easy to like ignore the quiet ones. Totally. But they might be the ones that need the most help.
And that's what I love in the schools that we worked with when they do the conferring, it's that intentional sort of scheduled thing that you're making sure you're making the rounds to everybody and not just the ones who need the help.
Yeah, that was like what Charles said, is like for this, like in addition to helping guide the conversations, it also just keeps me honest. Because it's like, oh, it might be really easy to ignore that one kid. But it's like if I look at my clipboard and it's like, oh, I have a conference with them in 2 weeks. It's like, and that's me failing in that half of having that difficult conversation.
Thank you. Any other things to come out of your conversations and learning with another group or person?
I thought it was interesting that we shared, and I'm in elementary and she's in high school, but we shared like very similar sentiments of like what we're trying to get out of our students and running into the roadblocks of having student populations that are sort of conditioned to learn and wanting to be told what to do and when to do it and how to sort of start breaking out of those molds. And so her conferring protocol is very similar to the ones that I worked on at Sandberg, and it's sort of like these simplistic questions that kids need to ask themselves before going into projects, and a lot of that like pre-work. And it's so interesting that we're not far away from each other between secondary and elementary.
Questions that are very obvious to us, but you ask them to a student and they have no answer. So.
Yeah, formalizing that. I think you can use the same protocol in adults, I think, too. So, I mean, they are kind of seemingly basic, but if you don't put that frame around them and make sure that you're doing them on a regular basis with all the kids, Any other thoughts on the feedback section? Great. Well, I just wanted to invite you to connect with us. All of the protocols and the template that you worked on today, in case you didn't grab those links, our white paper, which kind of goes through our, a lot of the stuff we shared today, and then we have a website, and then that's my email address, and I can connect you with anybody here today or any of this information.
Hey, just a quick question, kind of related to what you were just talking about. You guys seen how to, like, designing the protocol is one thing, right? But that, like, successful continued implementation of it is totally separate beast. And is there, I don't know, like, we don't have nearly enough time, I guess, to talk
To
about
get into all
that.
that. They are, I mean, the 5 schools we worked with, I think there's varying degrees of how they use the protocols that they designed during this session. Ben is one of the people who's lived to tell the tale, so I'll let him speak in a minute, but some of the schools were already doing the work and this protocol was solidifying it on paper. And others of them, it was more an aspiration of what they wanted to kind of get to formalizing, and maybe they're not quite there yet. But Ben, where are you guys at with?
I mean, we're very much, I was just talking to Arlene, the protocol is alive and well. It's a living, breathing thing in our school. We've invested a ton of time and money into it, and our entire 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are planning our entire year of projects around it. We've done a bunch of work, because with our student population, the questions that we're asking them when we have these conferring sessions, we find that they're like fundamentally unprepared to start answering these questions. So now we're doing pre-work with our students, so we're kind of like writing a separate protocol of work that we can do leading up to doing a conferring session, having a lot to do with like introspection, students getting to know themselves as learners, character work that we do at our school, and that hopefully will lead into students like having more formalized idea, a lot of peer-to-peer conferring that we want to start doing prior to getting into the driver's seat, sitting with a teacher and talking about what they want to do and why. So yeah, ours is, it's alive and well.
And I only paid him a little bit to say that. Thank you, we'll be around and,
I just want to add one thing to Ben's point, is that I think what I get really excited about is we saw this at a couple other schools where the alignment is now happening around how they have conversations with kids rather than alignment around standards, progressions, grades, this is an alignment of connecting one-on-one with kids. And then we had one school where they brought somebody new into their project-based environment, and they could say, here are the protocols, and it actually helped initiate him into that style of teaching. So I think you sort of shift to building around that rather than building an instructional space that allows that. You take that first and then build the rest out.
That's a great note to close. Cool. All right. Thank you all. Thank you.